Welcome back to IGN Live. I'm here talking Wolfenstein 2 with Tommy, the lead narrative designer
Yep.
of Wolfenstein 2. I don't even know where to begin to create a world like this, like you have, to bring these characters together. What's it like writing this game?
I mean, it's been an absolute blast writing this game and writing it together with my writing partner Jens Mattis, who's the creative director of Wolfenstein. There's been just so many creative highs we've gone through these years. It's been absolutely incredible.
So tell me about the main character for people who aren't completely versed in the Wolfenstein series, and I think maybe they'll start to understand why this is such a fun thing for you to work on.
Yeah, I mean, BJ is the original hero from the Wolfenstein 3D, and he's this stereotypical 80s American action hero. And what we've done is to sort of explore that character, that super heroic character, and add a lot of humanity and explore some of the more layered depths of him, and that's been super fun to explore in our writing.
Which I think is really fascinating because we in the 80s and 90s, we had a lot of video game characters that were like this. They were based on Arnold Schwarzenegger. They're based on Stallone. But they're awesome, they're lovable, they're bravado, but they're kind of like one-dimensional. And you guys get to bring in a little bit more heart and then a ton of weirdness too.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I think what's so fun about his character is that you have this character who is really absolutely fearless going into these combat situations, shooting Nazis. But on the other hand, he's this guy who is sick of fighting, sick of being in war, and just wants to retreat back into a normal life and start a family. And there's so many things that we can explore in that sort of contrasts in his two.
So he just wants to go home and raise kids, but he has to come out and shoot Nazis instead.
Yeah, and we're exploring that a lot with this new Colossus, that the relationship between him and his girlfriend Anya, who you met in the first game. And so we're continuing to explore that relationship in this game.
So you mentioned how the war is sort of taking its toll on him, and right now we're seeing him rolling around in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
What's the sort of what happened here? How did he end up in this
situation?
situation?
I mean, at the end of the New Order, things got he was really a broken man. There's and that's so interesting to continue that story and to explore actions have consequences, and so we start this game with him being absolutely broken, and not his physical abilities are not what they used to be, and having that through gameplay, experiencing that climb, that struggle up again is really interesting.
What's that like, writing a character that hasn't sort of hit rock bottom but is sort of beginning at it? It's not like you're making the situations tougher and tougher for him. Like when you find him, he's not in good shape, and so you kind of inherit this character that has been through hell. What's it like to sort of start the story with somebody in such a bad spot?
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes it so much more interesting to have him start at the, really beaten down, and exploring him and his struggles in these situations, and how that affects his relationship to other characters in the resistance, and his continued fight against the Nazis. It's super interesting to explore.
Were there any characters from literature or film or TV that sort of inspired that kind of trajectory that we see him on here?
Well, we sort of try to have a really open mind when we write the games, and we're not focusing on a single type of character. I usually liken his story a little bit to Die Hard, to John McClane there.
That's so weird, because I was literally going to say that about how he's beaten down at the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. He's in that situation where the bad guys have taken over everything, and he's like walking through broken glass, bleeding feet, and what he really wants to do is get home and celebrate Christmas.
Yeah, with Holly Gennaro.
Yeah, exactly.
Such a great movie.
It is.
No, so I'm fascinated in the way this is all coming together because obviously, you know, we look at the enemies in this game, we look at the setting of this game, which now takes place in America mostly.
Yeah, yeah.
So why the decision to bring it there, or here, or there,
Yeah.
wherever you are?
Well, America was always in our sights, even from when we started working on the New Order. We knew that we wanted to go to America because a lot of this, you know, the 60s, the cultural explosion, the cultural revolutions, the budding civil rights movement and all of that was sort of, a lot of it is coupled with America at that time. And I think we wanted to go there, but we didn't want to have just one level set there in New Order. So we just knew that it had to be its own game. And so it's been really been really interesting to get to go there finally and see all of that, those familiar images from the 60s, but subverted by the Nazi ideology.
Right, which I think is very interesting because like a lot of our audience, the audience who plays video games are young and didn't live through that time and didn't understand that, you know, what that was culturally or what the Nazi situation was like culturally.
Yeah.
So how do you sort of get to take that era and subvert it?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is it's tricky. You have to find these sort of familiar moments, but it's at the same time we don't want it to be too, you know, cliche. But I think it's important to show this kind of how the Nazis are sort of pushing their oppression onto the people slowly but surely, you know, over the decade. And so this is part of how they're doing it, you know, subverting these pop culture ideas.
I was going to say, do we get to see the way it kind of influences like art and music? I mean, when you think about this world, are you thinking about every corner of it, even the parts that the player might not see?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're exploring all kinds of different cultural expressions there in the game and stuff that you can, you know, everything from little details to things that are sort of part of the story.
Now, the weapons in this game, is that something like when you're coming up with the narrative, how much of that is influenced by like what the character is using to get through the situation at the time?
We try to have you know, sort of a give and take there always, and that's what's so great about working with guys at Machine Games, that we have this idea that that narrative and gameplay should go hand in hand from the get-go, and so we always work like that, where we sort of start with maybe a basic premise and the gameplay guys start brainstorming ideas, and we get together and figure out, you know, locations, settings that are interesting to explore, or gameplay stuff like, you know, being in a wheelchair, stuff like that. Yeah, so it's always a give and take, and I think that's really important.
I think like for the average gamer, I mean, including me, I think people would think that, you know, someone would write a story, someone else just adds guns to the story, they animate it in, and then it's done. But you guys aren't approaching this game like that.
No, we start from the get-go. We're super focused on the narrative and the gameplay experience being like walking in hand in hand, and I think that's very important to align the player motivation with the character's motivation, and I think you have to be part of the gameplay development from the start in order to do that.
I think that's a fantastic approach.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, you're dealing with a lot of serious, actual real-life villains here. Probably more real than we need to be these days. But you're also dealing with a lot of sort of goofy, like 1950s sci-fi stuff. There's a lot of, you know, kind of genetic modification ideas. There's robots. Like, is that where you guys get to come in and go like, okay, we have this serious concept, this serious story about Nazis taking over America, but we also want to get a little ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, part of it is that both me and Jens and the other guys, that we really like to We like these kinds of stories where there's stories that don't just hit one single note all the time, but instead contains contrast between, you know, lightness and darkness, humor, seriousness, violence, and stuff like that. But it's also part of, you know, the legacy of the Wolfenstein series.
Right.
The first game, I mean, it's set in the World War II setting, but it's at the same time there's this silliness, this over-the-top violence, and I think that New Order was sort of a continuation of that, but even more emphasized through this alternate reality.
So do you have it so like the artists and the animators come to you with an idea for sort of a set piece, or, you know, like here we just saw like this sort of giant robot helicopter thing.
Yeah.
Do they come to you with those things? Do you bring ideas to them? Like, how does that flow?
Well, I think it's you know, like I said before, it's a lot give and take. There it can be a lot of times me and Jens just going crazy, and the animators are like, "What? Are you serious?" And then the other way, they have their own ideas, you know, how to construct scenes or set pieces, or to make it as cool as possible. So. There's this huge collaboration in doing something, a game like this, that I don't think is really almost not possible in any other cultural.
Right, right. I think that's the sort of push and pull of like really fun writing and like really smart ideas and great art and all that stuff coming together. So tell me about this milkshake scene. I didn't want to spoil anything, but let's give our audience sort of an idea of what to expect with this.
Yeah, so it's when BJ, the player, is undercover in Roswell, New Mexico, and he's sort of infiltrating that city. He's going to deliver a nuke, which is encased in this fire extinguisher, pretending to be a fireman, and he's going to meet his contact in a diner in Roswell. And suddenly this Nazi commandant enters and wants to order a milkshake and starts up a conversation, and it gets really intense, but without without maybe the violence that you used to in games. But it's like low kind of intensity.
That sounds completely terrifying.
Yeah, it is.
I can't wait to experience this. When can people play this game?
October 27th this year.
And this is coming to
PS4, Xbox One, and PC.
Awesome. Tommy, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Wolfenstein 2 looks incredible. We'll be covering games all week long right here for Gamescom with IGN, so stick around.